My name is Elara Whitlock, and I learned early that silence doesn't earn you respect, only invisibility, for years. I let him talk over me, correct me, shrink me. Every accomplishment became luck, every opinion, attitude. He never yelled, he didn't need to. Disappointment has a quieter sting when it comes from someone who's supposed to love you. I told myself he didn't mean it, that maybe if I stayed patient, if I kept showing up, he'd finally see me. But there comes a moment when your own father looks at you, right in front of a stranger, and says, "She's not important." He didn't know that sentence would be the last one he'd ever say to me as the man in charge. Because the thing about being underestimated for too long is, it builds pressure. And pressure always finds a way to break something. This time, it wouldn't be me. The house smelled like grilled meat and nostalgia, the kind that always came with my father's stories about the Navy. He and our neighbor Neil sat across from me, laughing between bites, the TV humming with the evening news. The same yellow light that made the room look warm somehow made the silence between us sharper. My father raised his glass, his tone halfway between pride and dismissal. "She's doing some civil thing. Roads, bridges, water pipes. Nothing like command work, you know?" Neil chuckled. "The way men do when they're agreeing without thinking. Still, that's honest work, huh?" "Sure, just not the kind that changes anything." I kept my smile steady, pressing my thumb against the coffee cup until the porcelain trembled. A thin crack formed along the rim. No one noticed but me. They went on trading stories about war zones and weathered steel, the past glimmering brighter with every retelling. Then he looked at me, eyes soft but words sharp enough to leave marks. She could have joined the Navy too, but she wanted creative freedom. That's what she called quitting. I kept my eyes on the table. I called it choosing. The silence that followed was brief, but it stretched enough to hold years of everything we never said. He laughed it off, and Neil joined in. My phone buzzed under the table. Secure channel. Cascade ridge sensors fluctuating. Report by 0600. I locked the screen before he could see. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Just work," I said. I washed the cracked cup later, the fissure catching the kitchen light like lightning in slow motion. Pressure builds things. I thought, sometimes it breaks them first. Morning slid in slow through the mist, the kind of gray that never really turns into daylight. My father had already packed a thermos and his old Navy cap, claiming he just wanted to see what his daughter calls a project. I didn't argue. The drive out of Seattle wound through the hills, the sky low and heavy. He pointed at the fog, saying the Navy taught him how to command even the weather, that discipline builds control. I smiled, eyes on the road. "Then you must have missed the rain, Dad. Seattle still hasn't learned." He chuckled, proud of his own lesson, never catching the undertone. By the time we reached Cascade Ridge, the air smelled like wet stone and steel. The dam towered ahead, massive, quiet, alive. He took a long look, hands on his hips. "Looks impressive," he said, "but it's still just plumbing on steroids." I let him talk and led him toward the visitor deck, while he stopped to tell a guide how real engineering was done at sea. I slipped my ID card into the second scanner. The door beeped, light flickering from green to blue. Beyond it, the air changed, cold, metallic, steady like breath. Rows of glowing monitors stretched across the command room, alive with data. Each line pulsed like a heartbeat, connecting 5 states, millions of lives. A voice from the intercom echoed softly. "Director Whitlock. Federal coordination on standby. Maintain monitoring. Level 2 alert." I replied. For a moment I stood there, surrounded by the hum of power, thinking of the day I'd walked away from his world. I had once been accepted into the Naval Academy. I'd held the letter in my hands until the ink smudged. Proud, terrified. Command isn't for women who hesitate. He told me, and I'd hesitated. For him. I withdrew my application the next morning, studied engineering instead. 16 years later, I wasn't steering ships. I was steering everything that kept them afloat. On the glass wall before me, thousands of lights blinked, each a city depending on my judgment. I traced a path across them with my finger and thought, control isn't shouting orders. It's knowing which valve to turn before anyone else sees the leak. 2 days later, the call came before sunrise. Emergency alert. Irregular valve movements at Cascade Ridge. By the time I reached the operations center, the air was already heavy with static. Monitors flickered, the low thrum of warning sirens humming beneath every breath. I was scanning through the feed when a familiar voice broke through the noise. He stood in the doorway, cap in hand, wearing that half smile that always carried more authority than warmth. "Heard you've got some trouble," he said. "Thought you might need a real commander." I wanted to tell him this wasn't a ship, and I didn't need saving, but I'd learned years ago that arguing with him never ended well. "Fine," I said. "Stay behind me." At the security gate, the guard asked for clearance. My father held up his old Navy ID, the plastic edges worn smooth. Once Navy, always Navy. He said, chin raised like an order. The guard hesitated, then stepped aside. I caught the flicker of respect in the young man's eyes and the familiar sting of frustration in my chest. He was still commanding rooms that weren't his. Inside, chaos pulsed through the air. Aiden called out from across the control room. External signals still live. "Ma'am." Before I could answer, my father stepped forward. "Bypass the lock." He barked. "You can't fight the current. Let it flush out." A junior engineer hesitated, then followed the tone that sounded like command. Every light died at once. Screens went black. The sirens screamed. System lockdown. Data trace lost. For one breath. The room froze. Then I took control. Reset manual control. Isolate node 7. Restore internal loop. My voice was sharp enough to slice through the panic. When no one moved, I said it again. Louder. Now. Hands scrambled across keyboards. Systems rebooted. The red lights softened to amber. My father stared at the screens. Then at me. "You talk like you own the place." I met his eyes. "Because I do." The doors opened as a security officer entered. "Sir, you've issued an unauthorized order. You'll have to wait outside." His face flushed deep red. "She's my daughter. I was helping." "Regulations, sir." 2 guards stepped forward. He turned toward them, voice rising. "You can't throw me out. She's just a contractor. She's not important." The words hit harder than I expected. Every head turned toward me. The room fell silent, except for the low hum of machines. I walked to the scanner, pulled the red badge from my pocket, and swiped. The double beep echoed off the walls. Access Level 1 confirmed. Director Elara Whitlock, National Infrastructure Command. The screens burst back to life. Sirens changed tone, shifting to a Code 1 clearance. Every uniformed officer straightened. "Director, awaiting orders." My father froze. The Navy ID slipped from his hand and clattered against the tile. I turned to the guards. "He's with me. Mark him as visitor." A yellow badge was clipped to his chest. He looked at it, then at me, like a man realizing the world had moved on without him. "When did you become this?" he whispered. "When you stopped looking," I said quietly. I returned to the control panel, outside the glass wall. He stood motionless, the visitor tag glinting under the flashing lights. An old soldier watching a new kind of command rise in front of him. From the sky, Cascade Ridge looked like a wounded giant, water bursting in white streaks from its walls. Not from rain, but from systems turning against themselves. In the control room, the alarms overlapped, screens blinding with red. Alert. Auto-release active. Pressure level 84%. Unauthorized override in Sector C. Cut the auto feed. Switch to manual control only. I said, my voice steady against the chaos. "Warning! Manual mode requires director's confirmation," Calliope announced. "Confirmed!" The shift was instant. Every neighboring control grid went dark. The connections to 3 states disappeared in a blink, leaving only our board alive. I'd just taken responsibility for the entire Northwest. The federal line lit up seconds later. Director Whitlock, stand down. Wait for federal authorization. I looked at the graph climbing by the second. Authorization takes time. Water doesn't. I hung up. Ma'am, that's a federal order, one of the engineers said softly. So is saving lives, I replied. The room fell silent, every eye on me as the weight of that choice settled. Beyond the glass, my father stood in the observation corridor. Guards had refused him entry. He leaned close to the thick pane, watching me in the storm of flashing lights. One of the soldiers asked if I was really his daughter. He nodded slowly. Yeah, I just never knew she could command a storm. His fingers tightened around the yellow visitor badge, as if realizing what that word meant now. Pressure rising again. Aiden called from the console. Sensors at 92. The spillway might rupture. Director, recommend emergency drain sequence. Calliope warned. Negative. Drain sequence will flood Ridge Valley. Too many civilians. Redirect flow to the bypass tunnels. I ordered. Shut Sector D. Prep for manual valve access. The room held its breath. A young tech whispered. You're going down there yourself? It's my map. I built it. I'll fix it. I pulled on a reflective vest, grabbed a hard hat, and stepped into the elevator. The doors closed with a metallic sigh. Through the narrow window, I saw my father raise a trembling hand to the glass, unable to say a word. The red light washed over his face as the sound of water thundered below, an old man watching his daughter command the very element he'd once claimed only men could master. Steam rose in thick waves as I ran down the lower corridor, alarms bleeding into each other. Metal groaned around me, water hammering through pipes like distant thunder. Upstairs, a TV crackled through the emergency feed. Breaking news. Federal sources confirm Director Elara Whitlock has assumed full control of the Cascade Ridge hydroelectric complex. My father stared at the screen from the viewing room, eyes wet. He whispered my title as if testing the sound, Director Whitlock, like saying my name for the first time. Below, Aiden's voice crackled through the radio. Director, 30 seconds until overpressure breach. Valve 4 jammed. Manual crank required. On it, I said, my hands already on the wheel. The metal resisted. My shoulders burned. Blood streaked down my wrist. The wheel screamed, but finally turned. And the pressure dropped, slowly, stubbornly. In the viewing corridor, my father pounded the glass. Let me in there. That's my kid. No one moved. Calliope's voice buzzed in my ear. Director, you're exceeding physical limits. Shut up. Calliope, I gasped. Then, quieter. Override complete in 5 seconds. The lights flickered from red to green. Pressure stabilized. I sank to the floor, laughing through tears. The concrete slick beneath me. My whole body trembled, empty but alive. Upstairs, Lena from FEMA was already taking calls. Is it true Director Whitlock defied federal orders? A reporter asked. She prevented a flood. But did she have permission? She didn't need it. Lena hung up and turned to Aiden. They'll crucify her for saving us. I sat among the steam and dripping pipes, whispering to no one, as long as they're alive to talk about it. Moments later, the security door opened. My father stepped in slowly, eyes taking in every detail, the water, the broken wheel, my bloodied hands. He knelt beside me for the first time in my life, not as a commander, but as my father. Elara, it's done, I said, my voice barely a breath. He took my hand, holding it tight. There were no more orders, no arguments, only the sound of water calming in the distance. Up above, the red lights dimmed one by one. The broadcast changed tone. Cascade Ridge stabilized, no casualties. Authorities confirmed Director Whitlock's decisive action saved over 2 million residents. My father looked at the screen, lips trembling into a smile that broke halfway. You built the right damn bridge, kid. Rain hammered the dam, thunder shaking the valley like artillery. Inside the control room, alarms merged into a single, piercing scream. Pressure's critical! 30 seconds till rupture! Aiden shouted. I stood in the center, my body trembling with exhaustion, but my focus steady as glass. Director, recommend full evacuation. Calliope warned. Not an option. Manual override requires director confirmation. Then confirm. The room jolted as systems locked into manual. The countdown began. 0060, 0059, 0058. Outside, rescue convoys struggled through floodwater. Inside, engineers froze at their stations. All sectors hold. I said into the radio. On my mark. We'll follow you, Director, Aiden replied. If this fails? A young voice asked. Then the river wins, but not without a fight. Beyond the glass. My father watched, guards urging him back. She's not leaving that room, and neither am I, he roared. One behind the glass, one inside the storm. The lights turned crimson, 10 seconds to collapse. Calliope said, Execute manual flood diversion protocol, now! I pressed the button. The concrete shuddered. A deep boom echoed. Then, silence. Seconds later, the roar of water filled the air. Pressure, 42%, 31%, 15%. Stabilized. Cheers erupted. I fell into the chair, shaking, eyes wet. 2 million people safe, yet I defied Washington. The door opened. My father entered. The crew saluted. Director Whitlock. They said. He looked at me, pride breaking through his fear. You built the bridge I never could. I nodded once. On the monitor. Blue replaced red. Federal emergency averted. It's over, I whispered, as the final alarm went silent. 2 days later, Seattle woke to an unfamiliar blue sky. The rain had finally stopped. Every news channel replayed the same footage. Me shaking hands with the Secretary of Homeland Security. Director Elara Whitlock's immediate action saved the Northwest grid. The anchor said, An internal review confirms her decision was correct. I turned off the TV. The house felt smaller, quieter. My father was setting the table when I walked in. We didn't say much. We didn't have to. We sat down in the soft morning light. He spoke first, his voice rough but calm. That clearance, hard to get. They don't give it to civilians. I said, They give it to professionals. He lowered his eyes, a faint smile touching his lips. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It felt like a truce. On the table sat the same coffee cup from that night, the one with the thin crack along the rim. He'd kept it. The fracture hadn't spread. I reached for it. You didn't throw it away? Some cracks remind you to handle things gentler next time, he said. It wasn't an apology. It was something better, understanding. Across the room, a framed photo hung on the wall. Me at the award ceremony, the secretary's hand in mine. My father stared at it for a long time. When you were little, you drew bridges on every wall in the house. I smiled. I guess I finally built one between us. The bridge, the dam, the years of distance. All of it suddenly connected. As we cleared the dishes, I noticed the visitor badge peeking from his shirt pocket. He ran a thumb over it and grinned. Guess I'm still visiting your world. No. Dad? I said softly. You helped build it. He nodded. We didn't speak again. The light from the lamp cast a golden glow across the table. Warm and still, like the quiet after a storm. A week later, I returned to Cascade Ridge. No alarms, no flashing lights, just the soft hum of the turbines and the still reflection of morning. The dam stretched quiet beneath a pale sunrise, water smooth as glass. A guard at the checkpoint nodded. Morning, Director Whitlock. I smiled, nodded back, and stepped into the light. In the distance, my father's truck idled near the access road. He sat behind the wheel. The window rolled down, watching me with that gentle half-smile I hadn't seen in years. When I walked over, he got out, holding a fresh cup of coffee. Fresh brew, he said. Not Navy strong, but close. I took it, the warmth seeping through my gloves. We stood side by side, looking down at the slow, steady water. You were right, he said after a while. Pressure builds things, and breaks what shouldn't stand, I replied. He laughed softly. The sound carried in the cold morning air, familiar, unguarded. For the first time, it didn't echo with distance. I reached into my jacket and pulled out my red ID badge, spinning it between my fingers. The sunlight caught its surface, scattering gold across the water below. Then, I slipped it back into my pocket. Power isn't something you wear, Dad. It's something you hold, quietly. He nodded, eyes bright but damp. No words came. Just that look, the one that finally said everything he never could. I turned and started down the metal walkway, the wind tugging at my jacket. Behind me, the dam shimmered under the morning sun. Through the speakers, Calliope's voice echoed softly across the water. All systems stable. I smiled, watching the light spill over the horizon. So are we.